Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam volunteers for Punita Arjuna. It hasn't had a chance to win it. I've got a role for you. Gabriel, you want to read Arjuna, and who'd like to read Yudhisthira? Yudhisthira. All right. All right, we're on page 104. There's a lot more reading opportunities in the next chapters. King Yudhisthira remembered how Lord Krishna eased the weight imposed upon the earth by kings possessed of greed and hate. Arjuna went to Dwarka to learn of Krishna's plans, so Yudhisthira could wisely meet the monarch's demands. Arjuna traveled westward to that kingdom by the sea to meet the Lord and others of the Yadu dynasty. A string of evil moments then made Yudhisthira concerned and left him still more anxious for his brother to return. Just after Yudhisthira dispatched his trusted younger brother, the weather due in one season turned up within another. Good citizens transformed into a greedy, angry mob and cheated for their livelihood, neglecting honest jobs. Beloved, trusted friends began to cheat on one another, and quarrels manifested between fathers, sons, and mothers. Pernicious disagreements broke the bonds of man and wife. King Yudhisthira had never seen his subjects in such strife. As citizens degraded to unrighteous, troubled ways, King Yudhisthira began to wonder where he'd gone astray. While thinking his reign pious and this trouble undeserved, he called his brother Bhima to his chambers and observed.
Arjuna went for Krishna's counsel. 7 months have passed, and in his absence many evil omens have amassed. I wonder if Lord Krishna has departed from our lives, as Narada predicted. Has the time so soon arrived? Lord Krishna has delivered us a kingdom rich with gold, our wives, our heirs, our triumphs and imperial control. It's only due to Krishna that we draw our very breath, and only by his grace can we go forward after death. Just see, my mighty brother, how these threefold miseries produced of one's own flesh, one's peers or higher deities, alert us all repeatedly of dangers yet to come. Yet we proceed as usual. How foolish we've become. The left side of my body, for what seems like many days, has constantly been trembling in an inauspicious way. My heart is palpitating due to vague, uneasy fear. These signs imply an evil time is quickly drawing near. The jackal bitch rebukes the moon while spewing acrid flame, and barking dogs harass me without fear, respect, or shame. A donkey walks around me while my horse appears bereft. Auspicious beasts like cows now pass me only on the left. Just see, the pigeon heralds news of detriment and doom, while shrieking owls and ravens fill my heart with dread and gloom. These birds foretell the world collapsing in some great abyss. O Bhima, have you ever seen such inauspiciousness? The earth and mountains throb beneath an evil smoky sky, while lightning bolts from cloudless thunder shock and mystify. When clouds do come, they shower blood in terrible monsoons, as violent winds hurl dust about and dim the sky at noon. The sun recedes quite early, turning evening into night, revealing stars that seem engaged in bitter, vicious fights. I'm not the only one who holds such pessimistic views, for everyone I see is shedding tears and quite confused. The rivers, lakes, and reservoirs rise ominously higher, and ghee no longer sets ablaze the sacrificial fire. My mind is weak and seems to grow increasingly disturbed. What is this strange, perplexing time, and what is to occur? no longer nurse their calves. They cry all day and night. The bulls out in the pastures can no longer find delight. The deities appear to weep and want to leave their shrines. Our lovely towns are ugly now. Is this the end of time? These dreadful omens indicate some great catastrophe will soon descend and put an end to earth's tranquility, although the touch of Krishna's feet made planet Earth feel raised. These signs warn of a coming time when Earth will be debased.
As Yudhishthira expressed his fears to Bhima in this way, it happened that Arjuna came back home that very day. As his great brother walked to him, King Yudhishthira surmised Arjuna was consumed with grief, for tears obscured his eyes. Please turn to page 110. The trembling Arjuna raised his eyes to Yudhishthira and said,
"Disaster struck us as we made our way back here. But Krishna's wives were helpless, so I brought them here to stay. And then a gang of thieves appeared and stole them all away. I was the great Arjuna, so-called hero of such fame. My bow and arrows, chariot, and horses were the same. Without Lord Krishna, I became as useless in a flash, as seeds cast over barren land or ghee poured over ash. The fate of all our friends in Dwarka is even worse. They had a drunken fight among themselves, for they were cursed. Their battle was so vicious, it seemed no one would survive. Now all of them are dead, I think, except for 4 or 5. And no, all these disasters are, in fact, Lord Krishna's will. Though sometimes people help each other, sometimes people kill. Lord Krishna, seeing no one who could match his army's worth, has let them kill each other, thus unburdening the earth. When I gave up my duty in the Kuru-Kshetra war, Lord Krishna kindly counseled me until I felt restored. The sweet and holy lessons that I heard the Lord impart still fascinated my shattered mind and eased my burning heart.
Recalling Krishna's sacred words with loving dedication, Arjuna stopped abruptly and slipped into meditation. By contemplating deeply what Lord Krishna did and said, Arjuna seemed to calm the storm that raged within his head. Arjuna's pain appeared to be unbearably intense till Krishna's words returned him, restoring common sense. By consciousness of Krishna, he transcended any doubt. He saw the wheel of birth and death and ready to get out. He saw that Krishna comes and goes by choice and not by force, unlike we souls who struggle as our karma runs its course. He merged his thoughts in Krishna, who can magically take birth to stop demonic multitudes from plundering the earth. Arjuna's mother Kunti listened as her son described Lord Krishna's disappearance and the Yadu clan's demise. Deciding she could still serve Krishna in many different ways, Queen Kunti vowed to do just that throughout her final days. To Yudhishthira, the shocking news was worse than he had feared, but he had long prepared to act when Krishna disappeared. That very instant, he resolved to leave his worldly throne and follow Krishna back to his eternal, blissful home. The Kali age set in the day that Krishna disappeared, engulfing earth with hatred, lies, and poisoned the atmosphere. Unlike those modern leaders who hang on until they rot, King Yudhishthira renounced his throne without further thought. For Yudhishthira had tutored Vishnurata like a son to carry on the monarchy, and now that time had come. As Vishnurata scaled the throne, the citizens were pleased, for he was fit to govern the great kingdom perfectly. Then Yudhishthira placed Vajra, Krishna's grandson, in command of Mathura, the district famed as Krishna's sacred land. Completing years of duty to his subjects, friends, and wife, now Yudhishthira held rituals to give up family life. Relinquishing his splendid jewels, silks, and royal belt, and feeling more disinterested than he had ever felt, the former king surrendered his old body unto death and blended with the greater air his body's living breath. Then Yudhishthira concluded, as a soul he had acquired his earth and water body as the fruit of his desires. Returning all the elements he borrowed for this spree, he immersed his life in spirit, and behaved accordingly. He dressed in ragged garments and untied his tidy hair, and showed upon his face no more than silent, vacant stares. Without consulting anyone, he started walking north, and only thought of Krishna as he aimlessly went forth. Observing what the king had done to greet the Kali age, his younger brothers chose to do the same. They all could gauge that irreligious Kali would exact a heavy toll, infecting everybody with unworthy, evil goals. The saintly sons of Pandu had encountered many trials. They always followed scripture and did everything worthwhile. That day they took the final step that makes a life complete and fixed their minds entirely on Krishna's lotus feet. Thus purified, the sons of Pandu kept themselves absorbed in flawless meditation on their sweet, beloved Lord. Lord Krishna gave all five a gift not usually attained, admission in their bodies to his personal domain. And meanwhile, Vyasvadura, on a distant pilgrimage, had also left his body in the manner of a sage. Although he also fixed his mind on Krishna as he died, Vidura went to be a god and not to Krishna's side. Bereft of loving husbands, Draupadi was left alone, but she was fully trained to think of Krishna on her own. So when the time arrived for her to leave this mortal plane, by Krishna's grace she reached that place her husbands had attained. The pastime of the Pandavas departing from this world compares with Krishna's pastimes, for it's absolutely pure. A faithful soul who listens to it well from start to end arouses pure devotion to Lord Krishna. Deep within.
Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare. So a big theme here is preparing for death. There's a book, one scholar who is also, I think he would agree, a Vaishnava, teaches at Vassar College in New York, and he's written a book called Tales for the Dying, with the subtitle The Death Narrative of the Bhagavata Purana. It was initially his doctoral thesis, and it's a kind of literary analysis of the Bhagavatam, very well done. And yeah, the title is Tales for the Dying because he's saying that one way to read the Bhagavatam is to take it as, okay, Maharaj Parikshit, of course, at the end of the first canto is going to realize he has 7 days to live. And as Prabhupada would often say, we should take this also as a lesson for ourselves. Who knows how long we have? It can be 7 days, 7 years. It could also be 7 minutes. We never know. And so the Bhagavatam is preparing us. And what I find in the many tales for the dying which deal with death is there's essentially 2 categories of death described in the Bhagavatam. One is heroic death, and the other is pathetic death. And of course the Bhagavatam is urging us to prepare for heroic death. And within heroic death, there's, you can say, 2 subcategories. One is the heroic death of the Kshatriya on the battlefield, and the other is the heroic death of the yogi or the sage. And we get several descriptions of both in the Bhagavatam. Here we're getting first, the heroic death of sage kings. And of course, this is all, of course, I don't know of course, but it's also in the Mahabharata. It's called, I think, the Mahaprasthanam, something like that, the great journey to the Himalaya, where all the Pandavas are walking into the Himalaya, and one after another, they're dropping. And it's interesting here, it seems to say Draupadi was the last. As I remember in Mahabharata, she's the first to drop. But there's an interesting story. Yudhishthira is the last. And there's an interesting detail in the Mahabharata. Yudhishthira had, there was a dog that was following him all the way up the Himalaya. And this dog would just always be with Yudhishthira, so he kind of adopted the dog and say, okay, nice dog. Probably gave him some food and so on. And he comes to the top and he meets Lord Indra, who says, okay, now it's time for you to enter Svarga. Here's the stairway. And Yudhishthira Maharaj says, great, okay. My dog's coming with me. And Indra says, sorry, no dogs allowed. And Yudhishthira says, no dogs allowed? Well, then I'm not going. This dog is my loyal companion. I can't just leave him here. So it's either me plus dog, or it's neither of us. And so he kind of starts to go away. He has this opportunity to enter Svarga. This is the big aspiration of all Kshatriyas. And he says, forget it. It's going to be me and my dog. And at that point, as one might imagine, the dog then reveals himself to be none other than Dharma personified. And it's a demonstration that Yudhishthira is also Dharma personified, because he's showing that the sense of loyalty and then care, in this case for animals, is a higher principle. And therefore, this is a principle of Dharma. So it's a nice kind of ending, I think, of Yudhishthira's life.
We have a question, or we haven't entertained questions.
And we've pulled for the end, so
Oh.
we can cover everything.
Well, just to mention also the reference to Lord Krishna's will. This comes repeatedly in Bhagavatam. And yes, also Arjuna. Arjuna is a hero. He's, again, as I mentioned yesterday, the Mahabharata is all about this kind of macho spirit of these big, powerful Kshatriyas. And this becomes an arguing point for Krishna in the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, of why he should fight in the battle. Because what would people think if you don't fight? Your reputation is at stake. So now he's coming into this situation where Krishna has departed. He says, I was the quote-unquote great Arjuna, a so-called hero of such fame. My bow and arrows, chariot and horses were the same. Without Lord Krishna, I became as useless in a flash as seeds cast over barren land or heat poured over ash. Suddenly his identity, he's lost his identity and what to do in that condition. And there's another book written by another scholar about Arjuna, I forget the title, but it's focused completely on Arjuna, and it's an analysis of the three different aspects of Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. One, Arjuna as human, ordinary person with vulnerabilities and weakness. Two, Arjuna as hero. And three, Arjuna as devotional hero. These are all there in the Bhagavad Gita, and of course this then gets echoed in this passage in the Bhagavatam. And he's reflecting, how is all this happening? It must be Krishna's will.
Please turn to page 123. We need 3 readers for this section also. And would you like to be Dharma the book? Other readers? Narayani? Would you like to be Kali or Vishnurata? Kali. Okay, then we need a Vishnurata. Okay, should we go? We'll get the microphones ready, please. Okay. So we're skipping a bit, but Vishnurata now is going out on patrol, looking through all of this newly acquired lands as the new king, and he comes upon this unexpected sight. King Vishnurata looked and saw a shocking spectacle. A low-class man in royal garments bludgeoning a bull. The pure white bull, too frightened to negotiate or beg, just trembled and passed urine on his one remaining leg. Beside the bull, a lovely cow, the emblem of all good, withdrew in terror as the scoundrel beat her where she stood. Distressed and weak, with teary eyes and no calf at her teeth, she hankered just to find a grassy field where she could eat. King Vishnurata watched this blatant sin with shock and wonder. With bow in hand, he screamed out in a voice as loud as thunder,
"Immoral rogue, how dare you strike this helpless bull and cow? Though dressed up as a monarch, your behavior is most foul. With Krishna and Arjuna gone, have you become so bold to beat a harmless cow as if my lands were unpatrolled? You think you will be safe in this remote, secluded place? You demon, I'll destroy you and protect the human race."
The king then asked the wounded bull,
"Who are you, my dear friend? You seem to be a god who was elected to descend. At no time in the history of our ancient royal line has anyone suffered such an irreligious crime. Dear bull, you needn't worry. You are well protected now, and you may also dry your tears, O gentle mother cow. As long as I'm living, I shall thoroughly subdue debauchees like this rascal who has been attacking you. When cows are hurt, the king shall forfeit everything of worth, his life, his reputation, and auspicious future births. Religious kings protect the weak from those who wish them ill. This wretched, violent man must be immediately killed. The Pandu kings rebuke those who ignore the scripture's laws, unless there is an emergency or reasonable cause. The gods themselves shall feel my strength and suffer from my wrath should they abuse my subjects and pursue an evil path. The scriptures guide my kingdom, and my subjects are secure. How dare this cruel person break the legs of one so pure? Offenseless bull, who is this man who mutilates your frame and undermines the glories of our royal family name?"
The bull looked very thankful and respectfully replied,
"Your words befit the Pandu line, which you exemplify. Your forefathers created such an ideal atmosphere that God himself, Lord Krishna, came to serve King Yudhishthira. Dear King, it is quite hard to say by whom we are abused. Philosophers debate this point, but they too seem confused. Some say we cause our own distress when we commit a sin, while others say that higher powers rule the lives of men. And some declare that nature causes random joy and grief, while others claim that action rules with rejecting all belief. And some conclude that suffering can never be explained. In light of all these points, what do you ascertain?"
King Vishnurata heard all this with pleasure and surprise. for he did not expect a philosophical reply.
My dear religious bull,
He said,
you tactfully refuse to blame your foe and reap the fate of he whom you accuse. Personified religion, in your awe-inspiring way, you do not fault this man who has abused you here today. Yet, your troubles aren't explained by such philosophy, for God himself alone controls a person's destiny. The Kali Age's influence has broken your 3 limbs. The first of them, austerity, succumbed to prideful whims. Another leg, compassion, fell to gross intoxication. Your other leg of cleanliness was lost to fornication. Upheld by one remaining leg, you somehow hobble on. That final leg is truthfulness. It too is almost gone. For Kali Age proliferates in lying and deceit. When truth collapses, Kali Age's triumph is complete. Lord Krishna, with assistance from devoted pious souls, had recently exalted earth and eased her heavy load. Alone now as a cow, she worries teardrops in her eyes, while low-class men exploit her any way they can devise.
King Vishnurata calmed the bull and cow with pleasing words. Considering their agony and all they had endured, that fearsome warrior turned and gazed on Kali Age's head and drew his sword to pierce him and make sure the rogue was dead. The Kali Age personified, distributor of strife, could see the king was furious and set to take his life. The Kali Age could not fight back as kings do, so instead he dropped his phony royal dress and bowed his trembling head. On seeing Kali supplicate and put no battle forward, King Vishnurata gently smiled and sheathed his gleaming sword. King Vishnurata never killed surrendered souls, you see. That's why his great compassion is acclaimed in history. King Vishnurata said,
Arjuna always spared the man who knelt in supplication and presented folded hands. So you may live, but you must leave my kingdom right away. For every kind of sin will thrive where I let you stay. No, you do not deserve to stay where goodness is the norm, and sacrifice for Krishna is so expertly performed. In our kingdom, a sacrifice for God or man or king is offered just for Krishna, Lord Supreme of everything.
Now Kali trembled nervously as Vishnurata spoke and fearfully addressed the king, his voice barely a croak.
You rule the very earth, O king, so anywhere I go, I know you will await me with your arrows and your bow. You've seen my evil nature, and you know what to expect. Just spare my life, and I shall stay wherever you direct.
King Vishnurata studied Kali, thought a bit, and said,
I grant you life where couples join illicitly in bed, and you may also live where men drink liquor in the street, make wagers, and kill animals to dine upon their meat.
Now Kali was quite clever, and he very clearly knew that no such place existed under Vishnurata's rule. He said,
Thank you, my king. If my request is not too bold, please also let me live wherever men are holding gold.
When greedy people choose to issue paper backed by gold, they print more notes and currency than wealth they really hold. And yet, King Vishnurata took in Kali on that basis and told him he could live in any one of those 5 places. The gathering of gold creates a tainted atmosphere where liquor, meat, illicit sex, and gambling appear. A leader, priest, renunciate, or any moral soul should carefully avoid these sins in blissful self-control. King Vishnurata sheltered Kali in a clever way, for he began to gather all his kingdom's gold that day. He used the funds to put together Dharma's broken limbs and brought the earth contentment, so she flourished once again. For how can there be honesty when gambling is allowed? And how can there be mercy among those who slaughter cows? Can prostitutes be clean, or can a drunk be self-controlled? King Vishnurata stopped all this by proper use of gold. Enlightened sages, you are here by Vishnurata's grace, for he restored religion and put Kali in his place. When kings and priests are pure, the common man is satisfied. But where there is corruption, Kali will not be denied.
in Bhagavatam. And the political system, if you like, is clearly monarchy, something that people don't relate to these days so much, especially not in this country. If you propose, let's change our system, let's have a king or a queen, people will look at you, hello, what is with you? But what we get from this, I think, is the simple and yet profound idea that a leader is someone who has genuine responsibility and feels that responsibility. This is maybe a little tangential, but it comes back to this point. When was this? I was doing some research, maybe it was while I was here. I came across an interesting article by a woman, a scholar who does research she's an anthropologist, and she was interviewing older people in a cluster of villages in Rajasthan. And her specific question to them was, why, according to you, how do you see it that the environment around your village has become degraded? Because these were the older people of the village. They remembered the time when there had been forest in their environment, and now it was all lost. And some of these people were saying, well, it's because it's the age of Kali. But others explained in a more historical way. They said, previously we had, they had these, what were called princely states. During the British time, there were some 300 or more princely states in India. And these were under the British control, but the British said, you take care of your prince and you do your thing, we'll do ours, kind of thing. They had different agreements. So in Rajasthan, there were such princely states. And they said during this time, the forests were nicely cared for. But as they approached August 15th, 1947, which was the official date of Indian independence from the British, which one Vaishnava scholar I've talked to in Vrindavan, he sort of commented, he said, actually, the British conquered India on that date. That was the beginning of Western conquering of India. The beginning, not the end, it's the beginning. Anyway, so as this date was approaching, the Maharaj of this area saw the writing on the wall. He saw he's no longer going to be in power. What does he do? He has the trees that are, large trees along the roads, all cut down, and he sells them for his own profit. And so some of these older people knew that. And so this man, I don't know his name, who it was, but he felt, this is my kingdom, I have to take care of it. He was taking care of it, taking care of the forest and so on. And then after this, independence comes, then it's a government that sends some kind of official to be the forest ranger or whatever. He doesn't care anything about this forest. He just has a job and gets a salary, and maybe he's going to have another job next year, who knows. So again, responsibility finished. Therefore, forests finished. So we see this in the Bhagavatam, this idea of responsibility of leaders, very important. What else? Well, connected with that, the one way to see the Bhagavatam also, as I said, it's like a sequel to the Mahabharata. In the Mahabharata, of course, we have Krishna's words in Bhagavad Gita, and so one can also see much of the Bhagavatam as sort of extended purports to statements by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. And one of the famous statements of the fourth chapter, Yat yat acharati shashtas tatat evitar ujana sayat pramanam kurute lokastat anuvartate. Third or fourth chapter? Third chapter. Yat yat acharati, as leaders, as persons seen as leaders act, tata eva etara jana, people will follow that. Sayat pramana, whatever example that person gives, lokastat anuvartate, the whole world will follow. And that's also here. And then with Vishnurata, grace, I think it's nice you've referred to him as Vishnurata. It's easy for people. Kali spared. This is interesting also because it brings out the theme of the Bhagavatam of compassion. He is kind of super king, very powerful. First he's saying how he's going to kill Kali because he's such a rascal. But then there's a sudden turnaround when Kali, rascal as he is, throws himself at Vishnurata's feet. What can he do? The duty of the king. He's very duty conscious, and so as a duty conscious king, he can't kill someone who has surrendered to him. And then this arrangement. So one way to understand this whole passage is what is called an etiology. Here's a fancy word you want to impress your friends with. Etiology is a story that explains why things are the way they are. So this is kind of telling the story of the story of how the age of Kali comes about.
Thank you. So please turn to page 136 and we'll finish up. I'm going to skip a little part here and I'll summarize briefly. Maharaj Parikshit once while out hunting on his hermitage of the sage. The king was feeling very thirsty, so he asked the sage for water, but the sage was absorbed in trance and didn't hear him. So the king felt insulted. What did he do? Garland him with a dead snake. Yes, so the sage remained in trance, but his son Shringi was insulted and cursed King Parikshit to die in 7 days. And then the sage, hearing his son's voice, came out of his trance and said, "What have you done? This king was our protector. This is a terrible mistake." And then he said, King Parikshit could counteract this curse if he wanted to. He's powerful enough, but because he's a saintly devotee, he's going to accept it. So that takes us up here to this point where Parikshit is now renouncing his life. We do need a reader for Maharaj Vishnurata. Any volunteers? Would you like to do that? Parker, okay. So, page 136. As Vishnurata grew more guilty for his thoughtless deed, he thought aloud,
"I know my sin has placed a wicked seed of pain and karma sure to bloom and devastate my life. Lord Krishna, let me suffer, but please spare my sons and wife. A common man's transgression may be sometimes disavowed, but kings must always worship Krishna, Brahmin, priests, and cows. So let my strength and riches burn before this Brahmin's wrath, and I shall take another birth and walk a better path."
Reflecting thus thoughtful Vishnurata was apprised about the curse of shrinking and his forthcoming demise.
This news about my death is very welcome,
Thought the king.
It makes me apathetic to all ordinary things.
At once renouncing royal crown, majestic robes, and throne, the saintly Vishnurata went to Ganga's banks alone. The waters mixed with Krishna dust and sacred tulsi leaves. The Ganga is auspicious for those soon to be bereaved. The king felt blessed to know he had but 7 days to live, for that is far more notice than death usually gives. Rejecting other practices like garbage in the street, he fixed his mind entirely on Krishna's lotus feet. The worthy heir of Manu's throne resolved to sit and fast and think only of Krishna's feet until he breathed his last. Renouncing all attachment to his kingdom, land, and cows, the king forsook his ministers and took a sage's vows. The news of Vishnurata's vows pervaded earth and space. Great sages and their saints and their disciples hurried to that place. The glorious Saint Narada with Veena quickly came, along with famous gurus far too numerous to name. As many great souls came together, gathering around, the former monarch bowed to each, his forehead to the ground. Preparing to face death without the weight of past offense, a wise man gives respect to others out of common sense. The many sages sat at ease on Ganga's sacred sands, as Vishnurata stood and spoke to them with folded hands.
Among all kings I feel most blessed because you're here today, for sages often shun as kings and keep themselves away. The greatest person, Krishna, kindly took me by surprise, by coming as a Brahman's curse and bringing my demise. I feel that I am so attached to mundane life and wealth that I'll become detached by nothing less than death itself. O learned sages, Mother Ganga, hear my simple goal. I pray that you accept me as a most surrendered soul. Now kindly chant Lord Krishna's glories as I meet my fate, from snake-bird bite or anything the Brahman's curse creates. I prostrate at your feet, great souls, and pray that should I take another birth within this world, I'll live for Krishna's sake. And in that light, I also pray, dear sages, if you please, that I stay friends with everyone and live with devotees.
Then Vishnurata sat himself. His worldly work was done, for he had left the kingdom to his righteous elder son. He sat on sacred kusha grass and faced the northern sky, and then and there on Ganga's banks prepared himself to die. Observing this, the gods above were greatly overcome. They praised the king and showered flowers, beating sacred drums. The kindly sages also praised the king's courageous choice and rose to state their satisfaction with a single voice. Everyone. The helmets of 100 kings adorn your royal throne, yet we are not surprised to see you come here all alone. The Pandavas whose life is meant for praising Krishna's name, and as their true descendant, your conclusion is the same. So we shall watch King Vishnurata as you leave this plain, for Krishna's own abode which lies beyond deceit and pain. Acknowledging the sages. Acknowledging the sage's words as sweet, sincere, and true, the king replied,
Thank you, sirs. May I inquire from you? You've gathered here so wise and good and graciously inclined. In this life or the next, you simply want to serve mankind. Please tell me of that duty with which all men must comply, and more specifically for one who's just about to die.
Now at that moment there appeared the mighty son of Yas, apparently meandering, yet not appearing lost. He wore no clothes and seemed unfit for any social class. A crowd of children stared at him and giggled as he passed. His name was Sukadeva, and he was 16, you recall, when he left home for Krishna, brushing off his father's calls. His youthful torso, legs and arms, and sweet, attractive face were handsome, wide, and beautiful, and very nicely placed. His manly body sported arms of strong and lengthy height, with navel set in abdomen of deeply muscled stripes. His hair hung black and curly, and his lustrous body's hue reflected that of Krishna, an enchanting blackish blue. The women were attracted, for his charming smile was sweet. The sages also noticed him and rose up from their seats. They knew of physiognomies, and since they could detect that he was most enlightened, they extended their respects. Then Vishnurata bowed before this great exalted guest, while Sukadeva exchanged his bows with Vyas and all the rest. Surprised to see him taken to an elevated seat, the children teasing Sukadeva ran off in quick retreat. Surrounded by the saints and sages gathered from afar, young Sukadeva shone forth just like the moon among the stars. He sat and seemed prepared to fill his listeners' commands. So Vishnurata bowed again and said with folded hands,
Though I am just a lonely king, you've come to be my guest. Your presence makes these sages in the Ganga doubly blessed. As atheists cannot remain where Krishna has appeared, our sins depart when you arrive. You cleanse the atmosphere. Lord Krishna must have sent you, for he loves our dynasty. How could you otherwise have come across a man like me? Please take me as your student now, for what should I aspire, particularly at this time when I shall soon expire? How should I worship God before my body is destroyed? What things should I remember, and what acts should I avoid? You often stay just long enough for one to milk a cow. Will you please stay to answer all my questions here and now?
As questions flowed in pleasant speech from Abhimanyu's son, the son of Vyas grew eager to respond to every one. Resolving to assist the king and ready to comply, the striking sage inhaled and smiled and started his reply.
Should I say something? I mentioned that I would give this maybe a subtitle of the first canto. What was it? Do you remember? Yes, or Departures and Arrivals. So this is the big arrival. This is the grand finale of the first canto, closing off and completing the frame story, which is going to then be the preparation for the beginning of Canto 2. And it's an arrival, and it's also a glorious meeting, and we can say a wonderful reception. And it's something you can also look out for throughout the Bhagavatam, the stories of reception in the sense of receiving guests. And this is in contrast to the previous reception of Vishnurata being received or not received by Shamika Rishi, the sage who was meditating and didn't hear him, and Vishnurata is thinking maybe he's feigning, maybe he's intentionally ignoring me because whatever, he doesn't like kings or too much trouble for him or whatever it is. So there's a suspicion there, and this sense of suspicion becomes his downfall. That's a reception which is a non-reception. And now we get the opposite. We have all the sages and Vishnurata, and they're all welcoming Sukadeva because they're recognizing, they're appreciating him so perfectly. And so you can see through the whole Bhagavatam there. And there have been other receptions in this first canto. Krishna's reception in Dwaraka, there's a whole chapter of Krishna being received in Dwaraka. And so,
Thank you very much, Maharaj. It's been a real pleasure to have you here. Hannah, you had a question in the earlier section. Do you remember?
As we were reading about King Yudhishthira and the dog, I was was wondering the difference between duty and attachment, because whenever we were hearing about Sukadeva Swami, he ignored his father's calls and left home because that would have held him back from spiritual life. Or even, what's the one we had before?
Dharma? Kali? Arjuna? Okay, anyway, please get to it.
Anyways, the point is
Good example.
yeah. So I'm just wondering the difference, because it seems like the dog would have been holding the spiritual life.
Why didn't he be detached from the dog? Yeah, good question. I think there's this sort of interesting, we may say, creative tension between the two. Another way to see the Mahabharata is this tension between two ideas. One is called pravriti, engagement in the world, and the other is nivriti, disengagement from the world. And the whole Mahabharata you can see is, okay, what is my dharma here? So the Bhagavatam is bringing in a third factor and making that the central point. And what is that? Bhakti, devotion to Krishna. And so that story is not in the Bhagavatam. Here the focus is shifted. So yes, we're going to get a lot of emphasis on detachment, but it's all going to be detachment so that one can be attached to Krishna. But still, we do get these tensions, but now it's complicated in a nice way. We have pravriti marga, nivriti marga, and now we have bhakti. And bhakti, in a way, is, you can say, the resolution of the whole question. This opposition.
That's the answer. All right, any other questions? It's like Sada or Ravi.
Can you explain these lines in reference to Vidura? Like we read this, although he also fixed his mind on Krishna as a guide, Vidura went to be a god.
Because he had been Yamaraj, cursed by Manduka Muni. So when he left, he resumed his post as Yamaraj. So there's a brief mention of that in the Bhagavatam.
That was the question.
That was your question?
Yeah.
Wow. I got the most esoteric one. Okay, any other questions? To take advantage of Maharaj's erudition here, yes.
Hello. Hi. This is a little off topic, but taking advantage of Maharaj's erudition. I have a question about the invocation that we say before the Bhagavatam class. Nashprayesh Bhagaveshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. This is translated in our Bhagavatam as regularly attending classes on Bhagavatam. But I'm wondering if there's anything in that, anything contextual in that verse that designates that particular Bhagavat as the book Bhagavat and not the person Bhagavat.
In the Sanskrit, no. Ashtaprayeshu Bhagavaneshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. And Prabhupada explains elsewhere, or maybe it's in that verse, that there are two Bhagavatas. And that's I always was struck by that translation. Means daily attendance to Bhagavatam class. Where's the word class? So, of course, Prabhupada does this all the time through the Bhagavatam. He's sometimes giving a purport to a word or a phrase within its translation. And he's often drawing that from one of the traditional commentators, but sometimes it's just his own elaboration. The other word, though, nityam, can mean both eternal and daily. So there's a double sense. And so eternal, it can also mean ongoing. So it can be taken. This is, the whole Bhagavatam is poetry, which is very much appreciated and recognized and realized for us by Kalakantha Prabhu in his poetic rendering of Bhagavatam. It's so sweet. And poetry it's the richest form of language because it can be, as I'm saying, kind of an echo chamber. It's not two-dimensional. There's so much meaning in so many words, so many phrases.
English is so clumsy compared to Sanskrit. It takes so many words to explain the nuances in one Sanskrit.
Yeah, it can be, and therefore translation can be quite frustrating, I've found. We've done, there's another book that we've published, myself and Radhika Raman Prabhu did selected readings of the Bhagavatam. We took about 10% of the Bhagavatam, went back to the Sanskrit and did our own translations, and then we added notes, we added summaries of what we didn't translate. Sometimes it's so difficult to do this. It means so much more than what I'm saying, and or how I'm translating. So that's one of the reasons for commentaries, for adding notes, adds richness, and that's what makes it all relishable. Pivata Bhagavatam Rasam Alaya, the invitation, beginning of the Bhagavatam. Drink, it says, drink this rasa. Who can do that? Pivata Bhagavatam Rasam Muhur Aho Rasika, Ubi Bahuka. Rasika means connoisseur. I think that's the best translation. You know this word, connoisseur? It's a French word, but it became English. Literally it means knower, but it comes to mean one who has refined taste, one who has cultured taste. German language, Feinschmecker.
I wish this class could be Nityam. But we are all, what's it, Feinschmeck of Kasana? So, many thanks, Maharaj, for making 3 days for us. This is very gracious of you.
My pleasure.
Please come again. And again, we will be resuming our study of the first canto, beginning our study of the first canto in more detail, starting on Monday next week. So we'll spend a few weeks going through some of the key verses that we summarized. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.